Again, good morning and welcome. I'm Penfield Town Supervisor Tony LaFountain, and we have all of our board members here with us today, with the exception of Andy Moore, who is suffering with a little bit of the stomach bug that's going around. So our thoughts are with Andy. On this Memorial Day weekend, which is acknowledged as the unofficial start of summer, most people are eager to think of how they can relax and enjoy the long weekend, often forgetting the purpose of the weekend. No one could say it better than President Ronald Reagan in a speech in 1986 at Arlington National Cemetery, and he said, I quote, "Today is the day we put aside to remember fallen heroes and to pray that no heroes will ever have to die for us again. It's a day of thanks for the valor of others, a day to remember the splendor of America and those of her children who rest in this cemetery and others. It is a day to be with family and to remember," end quote. I believe the military should be the most honorable profession that we have. Just a couple of items to note before we get into our program. First, we apologize for Mother Nature. We've been teased by Mother Nature for the last 20 years in one way, shape, or form. And this morning, we thought it was appropriate, rather than having folks standing ankle deep in mud over at the Amphitheater, and our parade of roses going up and down the hill, someone slipping, that we thought it would be appropriate to be here. So we apologize for the tight quarters. We thank everyone that came out today for this very special remembrance that we have here in Penfield. At this point, I would ask that all veterans and active military personnel please stand to be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your service. At this time, I'd ask that everyone please rise for the pledge. Today, it's led by Boy Scout Troop 312. Gentlemen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ready? Two.
We had a young lady that was going to sing the national anthem, and she was here, but had to leave. She broke her ankle last night and was going to try to stick it out, but just could not do it. So she is en route to either urgent care or the emergency department. So our thoughts for Adriana Scalise. And at this time, we have, because today is a day of backup plans, we have our friends down in PCTV that will tee up the national anthem. I'd like to call on Pastor Rob Cattalani from the Browncroft Community Church for our invocation.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we pause today to remember the men and women who have given their lives in service of this country. We honor them today, those we know and the many we do not, who gave the ultimate sacrifice that we may be free. We pray for their families, especially those who've been lost recently. May they know your love, your strength, your peace. We pray too for our nation today. Help us to remember, both young and old, that freedom is precious and never to be taken for granted. May we honor those who've helped secure our freedom by seeking to advance those freedoms in our lives today. Give us wisdom to know how to best manage this gift in our families, our neighborhoods, in our schools. Amen.
At this time, I would like to recognize some distinguished members of the audience. We have the Deputy County Executive, Thomas Van Stryduck, with us this morning. We have our County Legislator, Debbie Draw, from the 9th District. Debbie. A former colleague of mine on the town board, Maggie Hessian. And my very good friend who is representing the Monroe County Sheriff's Department, a good partner between Penfield and the Sheriff's Department, Captain John Ott. At this time, I would like to recognize Councilman Rob Quinn.
Good morning. I have the privilege of welcoming Commander John Allen as our guest speaker today. John grew up in South Burlington, Vermont, and entered the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in 1975. As a commissioned officer, his operational specialties included command, control, communications, and intelligence, while serving aboard Coast Guard cutters and U.S. Navy ships as a narcotics law enforcement, intelligence specialist, and deck watch officer. Some of his key special and command assignments include Senior Coast Guard Liaison Officer to Joint Task Force 160 in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Senior Military White House Social Aide to the President of the United States, Senior Command Duty Officer for the Secretary of Transportation and the Commandant of the Coast Guard, Commanding Officer of the U.S. Coast Guard Loran Station on Iwo Jima, Japan, where he was the senior U.S. on-island military officer serving as one of the on-island hosts for the first reunion of honor for U.S. and Japanese veterans commemorating the 40th anniversary of Iwo Jima. John retired from the Coast Guard in 1999, and over 24 years of active duty service, moved to Penfield and began his second career at Xerox Corporation, where he is now the Information Security Business Operations Manager for the Xerox Technology business in Webster. John also volunteers in his community in his free time. He has a general Class A amateur radio license and spent hundreds of hours volunteering with the Military Affiliated Radio Systems, MARS, to do radio phone patches from active military personnel back to their families in the USA during holidays. Other volunteer projects include Coast Guard Academy admissions partner, helping young men and women from western upstate New York with their appointments to the Coast Guard Academy, Management Advisory Board to Coast Guard Academy admissions, Chairman Coast Guard Academy Class of 1979 Stewardship Committee, Military Academy Nomination Selection Committee for Congressman Tom Reed, active as a praise team vocalist and soloist at Faith Lutheran Church, which is spectacular, by the way, and first robotics judge. John is married to Dr. Terry Allen, a veterinarian at Clark Animal Care Center. Their children are 2 rescued cats. In his free time, John enjoys golf, biking, spinning, and travel. Would you please help me in welcoming John Allen?
I can't believe I actually did all those things in 24 years. It's, since we're inside, I'm actually going to be bringing out something that I will use as a prop in a bit. Thank you, Supervisor LaFountain, members of the council, distinguished guests, current and former veterans and their families, and everyone else here who is elected to take a pause in their very busy lives to reflect on the contributions made by our men and women who have served and are serving. My wife and I have been fortunate to attend the Penfield Memorial Day celebration for over 10 years, and we have found it to be an extremely meaningful event given the many members in our family who have served and are currently serving. My family goes back to the first Pilgrim colony in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where my grandfather, William Bradford, was served as its first governor. From there, I've had grandfathers who have fought both in the Revolutionary War and Civil Wars. Both my father and my father-in-law, who's here today, were military officers, having both retired from the United States Coast Guard and U.S. Army, respectively. And now my wife and Terry are very proud to have a nephew who is a Coast Guard helicopter pilot and a niece who is training to be a helicopter pilot. So service to our country is in our bloodline, and we are very thankful to all who serve. On this Memorial Day, it is very appropriate to share some of my experiences from my assignment as Commanding Officer, United States Coast Guard, Loran Station, Iwo Jima, Japan. But let me share a little bit about Iwo Jima before I share its significance and honor that I had from this assignment. Notwithstanding its history, how would you like to spend a year on a tropical island with warm temperatures, a few palm trees swaying in the warm breezes? How about being able to walk on 2 one-mile-long beaches or other smaller secluded beaches where no one has walked for maybe a week or two? The island is small. It's only 4 miles long by 2.5 miles wide at its widest point. Iwo Jima sounds like a dream vacation, doesn't it? Well, there are some other things about Iwo Jima I should share. It smells like rotten eggs almost all the time, as there is an inactive volcano on the southern tip of the island, last erupting in 1824, and there are many active fumaroles and sulfur vents throughout the island. In fact, Iwo Jima, translated from the Japanese, means Sulphur Island. There is no fresh water other than what is collected from rain. How about having no rain for almost 200 days, allowing you only to take sea showers for those 200 days? How many people remember sea showers, 1-minute sea showers? How about being hit by 4 typhoons? That actually helps with being able to take long showers. But what if I told you that swimming is prohibited because of all the severe, deadly undertows and rip currents around the island? Oh, I should also tell you about the scorpions and the potentially deadly centipedes. They're almost everywhere. By the way, they like to hide in your shoes, and if you do get bit, you might have to be medevaced 4 hours away to Yokota Air Force Base because they are deadly. Add to this, there are no telephones, no televisions, logistics flights only once a week for supplies, and communications to the United States is extremely spotty using high-frequency radio transmissions. The total population is 28 Coast Guardsmen and 400 Japanese military from their maritime air self-defense forces. This is a restricted military island, and there are no commercial flights to the island, no family members are permitted, and no women are stationed there. There's lots of unexploded ordnance from World War II on the beaches and in the hundreds of caves. Last thing, there are frequent earth tremors and small earthquakes every day. The largest one I felt was on the Richter scale 4.0, as there was a small island forming 20 miles to our south. Now, how many of you all would enjoy this lovely experience? Well, welcome to 1 year of isolated duty, and welcome to Loran Station, Iwo Jima. Let's first share a little bit about the Coast Guard in Iwo Jima. And you probably don't know this, but the Coast Guard established its first Loran Station 4 months after the battle was over in 1945. Loran is a low-frequency navigation system. For those that know anything about amateur radio, it's 100 kilohertz, which enables navigation to out to about 1,000 nautical miles. Both airplanes and ships used to use Loran as a principal navigation means, and it was used in both the Korean and Vietnam Wars. LORAN was eventually replaced by satellite and inertial navigation systems. When I was on Iwo Jima, our radio tower was 1,350 feet tall, quarter-mile up. We used to have to climb that tower to change out the aircraft warning lights, and it would take about 6 hours to go up and down. It was not, and I never did, I was afraid of heights. I always had guys else who would like to go up and get the good views. But the interesting thing about LORAN is it broadcasts at 2.2 megawatts of power. So I could take a fluorescent light bulb, hold it in the air, and it would flash without being connected anywhere to power. And that's because of the high radio frequency energy that's there. Hopefully there's nothing wrong, my wife would probably say there's nothing wrong with me, hopefully psychologically, for being exposed to radio frequency energy for a long period of time. We did generate our own power. We collected and purified rainwater and sort of ran a small village, complete with a small store and post office, all operated as collateral duties by the Coast Guardsmen that were stationed there. As commanding officer, I was responsible for the northern third of the island under the U.S. Status of Forces Agreement with Japan. Iwo Jima was returned to Japanese control in 1967, and it became one of Japan's premier air training bases. I frequently met with the other two Japanese commanding officers stationed there, Captain Fujita with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force and Colonel Ishikawa with the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. Given that there wasn't a lot to do on an isolated duty station, every weekend there were sporting events and social events at the Japanese base. Their base was a lot bigger than ours. As far as sports go, the Japanese would beat us soundly in volleyball. We would beat them in softball, and we usually played to a draw in soccer. There was sort of a golf course on the island, if you call it a golf course, but it isn't anything like we would recognize around here in Rochester. In fact, they used to use AstroTurf for their putting greens. Very unusual. In 1992, the Coast Guard shut down LORAN Station Iwo Jima and turned it over to the Japanese. Now, with this as the backdrop of Iwo Jima, Coast Guard LORAN Station Iwo Jima played a significant role in the first ever reunion of Japanese and Marine Corps veterans who fought against each other for many weeks back in 1945. This event was called the Reunion of Honor and commemorated the 40th anniversary of Iwo Jima on the 19th of February, 1985, with over 2,000 returning Japanese and Marine Corps veterans and widows. Now, I want you to think about this. Given what I just shared to you about the isolation of Iwo Jima, I'd like you to consider how you would do an event with this many people coming onto an isolated duty station. Think about it. Almost all of the returning veterans were in their late 60s, 70s, and 80s. There is no transportation around the island's dirt and sometimes potholed roads. There is only a small Japanese medical clinic on the island. There is very, very limited space to park all the airplanes at the Iwo Jima airport. There is no bathroom capacity for 2,000 veterans and the additional 1,000 US and Japanese military that were brought in to support the event. Think about it. We probably increased the population of Iwo Jima by 10 times for that one day. There was a large influx of international media, and I ended up doing countless interviews leading up to and during the event. I actually had the honor of chatting with Joe Rosenthal, who took the famous flag-raising, Pulitzer Prize-winning photo atop Mount Suribachi when he came and visited to the island during the planning for this event. The event could also not impact our Coast Guard operations. We still had to do what we needed to do in spite of everything that's going on. And our tiny little Coast Guard station, LORAN Station Post Office, was asked to be staffed so visiting veterans could mail postcards that would be dated the 19th of February with our Iwo Jima LORAN Station flag-raising franking. This was extremely popular with the veterans to be able to have something dated on that particular day. And finally, you wouldn't think that's enough, right? Finally, we had to support the television documentary crew that would be coming on the island prior to and during the event to capture this historic moment in history. Well, planning for the event started for me when I first got on Iwo Jima in October of 1984, with frequent Japanese and US meetings and many, many planning messages to try to identify all the things that would be needed to support the veterans returning to Iwo Jima. Additionally, I was the one personally helping with the television documentary crew that was going to be produced about the reunion. It was called the Reunion of Honor. It was produced by Arnold Shapiro, who did shows as Rescue 911, Scared Straight, and Big Brother, became a very, very good friend. And since I did all of the on-island historical tours, and for the VIPs and visiting military people, and explored just about everywhere you could, including all of the beaches, all of the caves that were opened, and the battle areas such as the Amphitheater, Meat Grinder, Cushman's Pocket, and Bloody Gorge, I helped the television crew find the best sites to capture for that documentary. I can actually share a lot more regarding the history from the perspective of Japanese veterans, as I met a number of Japanese survivors from the Battle of Iwo Jima. One I would like to highlight is Reverend Tsunetsu Wachi, a Buddhist priest who was extremely instrumental. I would actually say he was the one that actually allowed the United States to obtain permission from the Japanese government to hold this first ever reunion. Remember, Iwo Jima is a Japanese island. Wachi was the president of the Japanese Survivors Association, and he used to stay with the Coast Guard whenever he came to Iwo Jima when he opened up the Japanese caves and performed ceremonies in honoring the Japanese war dead, which is the senior U.S. officer I was expected and did participate in. Wachi and I had many conversations regarding Iwo Jima and World War II. He was also formerly Captain Wachi, Japanese Imperial Navy, who helped actually build and design all of the Iwo Jima battle fortifications before the actual war. So I got an inside look as to what was going on in terms of the strategies from the Japanese perspective. Well, after the planning was complete, over the course of about 5 months, the execution of the event actually began 3 days prior, with the Marine Corps staging transports and other logistical items from a Navy landing helicopter assault ship, which was just offshore. By the way, this did include several hundred porta potties to address that key bathroom issue. You would not believe the amount of messages that went back and forth regarding that. It was a significant issue for all of us. The actual event started at 0800 on the 19th of February, where I had the honor to lead a joint color guard of Coast Guard and Japanese military personnel right on top of Mount Suribachi near the Iwo Jima Marine Corps Monument, where the first flag raising occurred and was taken by Joe Rosenthal. I happen to have with me, if I can get this to stay, I'll move this up here. These are the two flags that were raised atop Mount Suribachi on the 19th of February, 1985. These are signed by me as having been raised up top. And notice there are two flags. You cannot raise an American flag by itself because it would be an act paramount to war. Remember, it's a Japanese island. So these are the two flags that were raised. And I'll talk a little bit more because we actually raised a set of five sets. All right, where are we? As I'm going back into it, since Iwo Jima is a Japanese island, every year we needed to obtain permission from the Japanese government to raise a U.S. flag atop Mount Suribachi. The Coast Guard Loran Station used to raise both sets of flags on the 19th of February and on Memorial Day. So while the Coast Guard is no longer there to raise the flags, I'm sort of honored to raise the flags again on Mount Suribachi with these remarks today. We actually raised 5 sets of flags, so now you're seeing one set. One set I donated to the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico. Another set I sent to my boss in Far East Section in Tokyo, and also to my district commander in Honolulu, Hawaii, and my executive officer kept the other set. So there are only 5 sets of flags that were raised on the 19th of February. That was the first reunion. There have been subsequent reunions after that, but this was the first one. Let's briefly now chat about the monuments on Iwo Jima leading up to the dedication of the 40th anniversary monument and the memorial event itself. On Iwo Jima, there are hundreds of Japanese monuments, mostly Buddhist and Shinto, but there are only 4 U.S. monuments. There is one U.S. monument where the Marine Corps Battle Cemetery was located. These veterans were later removed, and some are now buried at the National Cemetery of the Pacific in Punchbowl Crater in Hawaii. There is a Marine Corps monument atop Mount Suribachi with a steel pipe with a red X on it, where the flag was actually raised, and captured in the iconic photo by Joe Rosenthal on the 23rd of February, 4 days following the actual invasion. There is a large monument carved into a large sandstone rock by Walden T. Rich, a U.S. Navy Seabee who was stationed there in 1945, which depicts the flag raising in its carving. All three of these monuments were maintained by our Coast Guard Loran Station until 1992. I assume now the Marine Corps on Okinawa comes over and is now maintaining these monuments. The final monument was erected in commemoration of the 40th anniversary of Iwo Jima. Returning to the actual event, and following the joint flag raising in the morning atop Mount Suribachi, all of the Air Force transport planes began arriving from Yokota Air Force Base. As they arrived, the U.S. veterans would embark on Marine Corps transports to visit the key sites on Iwo Jima, which I helped identify. The highlights for the returning veterans were stops at Invasion Beach, atop Mount Suribachi, and a Japanese cave. While this was going on, I was traveling around to many sites to ensure there weren't any major issues. I recall that I visited the Invasion Beach in the morning, and I saw a Marine Corps veteran standing down on the beach, pointing up towards where I was standing, sort of aiming a rifle. At the same time, I observed a Japanese veteran standing near me and seemingly pointing down a rifle toward the beach where the Marine Corps veteran was standing. Since I did speak limited Japanese following 5 weeks of Japanese language immersion school, I did find out that the Japanese from the date he was firing his weapon down at the landing Marines. Then I asked the Marine veteran when he had landed. And yes, I discovered that these two men were actually shooting at each other 40 years earlier, and now we're going to meet for the first time in person. I wasn't sure exactly what was going to happen, but when I shared that they were actually shooting at each other 40 years earlier, they both approached each other and gave each other a big hug, and tears started flowing. I did the best I could with some translation for them, but their reactions spoke what I couldn't translate. They had each come back to put behind them the tragic memories of that battle. Following that really emotional experience, I headed to another area by Invasion Beach where all the Japanese and Marine Corps veterans were arriving to participate in the actual reunion of honor ceremony. This included solemn music from Japanese and Marine Corps military bands and remarks by distinguished visitors, including the Commanding General, Fleet Marine Forces Pacific, Lieutenant General Charles Cooper, United States Marine Corps. Both Captain Fujita, who I talked about earlier, and I were introduced as the senior officers stationed on Iwo Jima and were thanked for providing all the support we did for the event. Part of General Cooper's remarks that morning read as follows: "Seated here today together are men who, on this same soil, in an earlier day, were the most mortal of enemies. If peace and friendship is possible between these men, then peace and friendship is possible among all men everywhere." At the conclusion of the ceremony, there was a highly emotional handshake of peace, which was led by Reverend Tsunetsu Wachi. This was the first time all of the Marine Corps and Japanese veterans actually met and shook hands. And again, you could see the emotions from all of these men who had first met as enemies 40 years earlier. So what's the inscription on this monument, whose purpose is to memorialize the 6,800 Americans and 18,800 Japanese killed in that fierce engagement that has become part of Marine Corps lore? The message is inscribed on both sides, one for each language. The English side faces Invasion Beach, where the Americans landed. The Japanese side faces inland, where they were defending. For those who might be interested, the John Wayne Foundation paid for this monument. The inscription on this monument reads, "On the 40th anniversary of the 36-day Battle of Iwo Jima, American and Japanese veterans met again on these same sands, this time in peace and friendship. We commemorate our comrades, living and dead, who fought here with bravery and honor, and we pray together that our sacrifices on Iwo Jima will always be remembered and never repeated." Those were great words back then, and those are great words today. Personally, I so vividly remember the first time I stepped on the black sands of Iwo Jima's Invasion Beach in October '84 and stared up at Mount Suribachi and I choked up, and I said, my God. I shed a tear, I said a silent prayer, knowing the significance of that mile-long beach I was standing on is where 2 Marine Corps divisions had landed. So whenever I took visiting U.S. dignitaries around Iwo Jima, all who were visiting Iwo Jima for the first time always seemed to have the same reaction when they stepped back and reflected on what I had shared about the Battle of Iwo Jima and how many were either killed or wounded. And now, as I reflect on this Memorial Day, I think of all who are serving and who have served. I pray again that we will never see a battle like Iwo Jima, and I offer the following prayer. May our Lord God watch over all the men and women who have served and are serving, have supported or are supporting our military services, whether on the front lines or from our homes. We remember, honor, and thank those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, whether they be in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, or Coast Guard. We thank you all for all of your sacrifices and support. Bless those and their families for their services, both now and in the past, and may God bless America. Thank you and happy Memorial Day.
Before we start with our presentation of roses, I did miss one distinguished member of Penfield. That's our town clerk, Amy Steckloff. And Amy, thank you for being here today. At this time, I'll call on Councilwoman Linda Kohl for the procession of roses.
Good morning. The Procession of the Roses is a unique and moving Memorial Day tradition in Penfield. Members of the community and the community organizations will present roses which symbolize the service and sacrifice of our veterans and the active troops. Okay, you can't hear? Okay, do you have the roses out there? Okay, all right. So when your name is read, please proceed on the outer aisles to the back of the room to get a rose, and then proceed with the rose to the front of the room and place it in one of these vases, and then please return to your seat via the outside area. Okay, so I'll start reading the names. Joseph Simone, U.S. Navy, in memory of all those who fought in the Korean War. It's right there. Oh, that's going to take a bit. Okay, Sabrina's bringing it to you. Okay, Boy Scout Troop 312, in honor of all the past and present members of Troop 312 who are serving or have served our country. The LaFountain family, in honor of the veterans of the Donovan and LaFountain families. Deputy County Executive Thomas Van Strydank for the Office of the County Executive Sheldon Offo, in memory of Sergeant Robert Bryson, U.S. Marine Corps, killed in Vietnam in 1969. Gene Casey with the Krenzer and Metzler families, in memory of Corporal David Harold Casey, U.S. Army Medical Corps, Korea. Melinda Falkoff, in memory of Sergeant Norman Grau, U.S. Army Medical Corps, World War II, Royal Merkel, U.S. Army, World War II, and in honor of Douglas Chancellor, U.S. Army, Vietnam. Alexander Barrett, for the office of Senator Rich Funke, in honor of the brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice fighting for our freedom. Cindy Bouchard, in memory of Bruce Daniels, U.S. Navy, World War II, Len Bouchard, U.S. Army, Vietnam, Bert Daniels, U.S. Army, World War I, Rex Daniels, U.S. Army, Vietnam, and Joe Skane, U.S. Marines. And Betty and Brent Maya for Penfield Parrington Kiwanis Club, in honor of David Maya, U.S. Marines, Navy Cross recipient. Penfield Presbyterian Church and Early Learning Center, with gratitude to the brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice fighting for our freedom. F.A. Jeremy Brush and F.A. Reed Trenton for Coast Guard Station Rochester, in honor of the brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice fighting for our freedom. Tim and Sue Murphy, in honor of Lieutenant Dan Murphy, U.S. Navy active duty, and in memory of Ensign Sean Duffy, U.S. Navy aviator, Petty Officer Matthew Cantor, U.S. Navy Special Operations. American Legion Bremen Post, 1229, in memory of Peter D. Bremen, Robert C. Bremen, Chester Mundy, Leland Erkwitz, John Vandermally, Fred Witt, and all members of the Bremen Post 121229 who have passed away this last year. Richard Goff, in memory of Robert H. Goff, U.S. Army Air Corps, World War II, Gregory J. Goff, U.S. Marine Corps, and George Willen, 53rd Kentucky Mounted Infantry, Civil War, and Patricia Goff, in memory of William Bitts Vagley, U.S. Army, World War I, and Frank H. Vagley. Legislator Debbie Draw, in memory of Private First Class Thomas Quinlan, Purple Heart recipient, U.S. Army. Peggy O'Neill for the Penfield Library, in honor of Staff Sergeant Wilbur H. Cooper, 94th Infantry Division, 301st Field Artillery, Battle of the Bulge. Penfield Town Clerk Amy Stockloff and family, in honor of Lieutenant Clarence Bergerman, Army Air Corps, World War II, and in memory of Sergeant Hy Bergerman, U.S. Army, World War II, Lieutenant First Class Harry Bergerman, U.S. Army, World War II, and Petty Officer Jerry Bergerman, U.S. Navy, World War II, and Charles B. Leston, Navy Pharmacist, Mate First Class. Judy Johnson, in memory of Brian Schramm, U.S. Marine Corps, Iraq War, and Robert Mutry, Army Air Force, World War II. Barb Van Houten, in memory of John Bostwick, Metalsmith, 2nd Class, U.S. Navy, World War II. Burton W. Turner, in memory of Charles W. Turner, U.S. Navy, World War II. Mary R. Charter in memory of Private Class Harold L. Mandel, U.S. Army, World War II. Alice J. Degas in memory of Private First E3 David Charles Degas, U.S. Army, Vietnam. Linda M. McCrane in memory of William R.J. Mandel, U.S. Army Specialist 4, Vietnam. Commander John Allen and Dr. Terry Allen, in honor of Colonel Robert W. Flint, U.S. Army retired, Lieutenant J.G. Gordon Allen, U.S. Coast Guard retired, Lieutenant Michael Flint, U.S. Coast Guard, Lieutenant J.G. Elizabeth Flint, U.S. Coast Guard. Penfield Rotary Club, in honor of the brave men of Penfield who made the ultimate sacrifice fighting for our freedom. Tony and Marianne LaPaula, in memory of Staff Sergeant John A. LaPaula, O Company 75th Infantry, 82nd Airborne Division, killed in action April 15th, 1969, Vietnam. Debbie Holloway and Chuck Fox, in honor of Arthur Wasensky, U.S. Army Harold Wasensky, and W.R. Robert Fox, U.S. Navy. Elmer Pankratz, in memory of Lieutenant Richard Light, Army Air Force B-26 bomber pilot. Ellen De Bono, in memory of Alfred De Bono, U.S. Army, Korea. Sergeant Steve Lacuro, U.S. Air Force, in honor of the brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice fighting for our freedom. St. Joseph's Church, in honor of Seaman First Class Rose Farinella, U.S. Navy. James and Christine Doyle and family, in memory of Bill Kramer, U.S. Army Air Corps, World War II, James Doyle, U.S. Army Air Corps, World War II, Paul Michael Edgett, U.S. Marines, Vietnam, and with gratitude to Colonel Thomas Obst, U.S. Army, Desert Storm, and Lieutenant Daniel R. Obst, U.S. Army, Iraq and Afghanistan. Okay, Maggie Hessian, in honor of Sergeant Betty Perkins Carpenter, U.S. Air Force, and Arlene Figler, U.S. Navy medic pharmacist mate. Diane Held, in memory of Private First Class E3 Michael Ambruessa Jr., U.S. Army Field Operations Purple Heart recipient, killed in action September 7th, 1968 in South Vietnam. Bob and Barbara Quinn, in memory of Sergeant Anthony Andolino, U.S. Army, Sergeant Robert Quinn, U.S. Army, Sergeant Gabriel Brooks, U.S. Army. Thomas and Nancy Hammond, in memory of Captain Charles Kins, U.S. Marines. Roseanne Hoggets, in memory of Private Joseph Tumino, U.S. Army, Merrill's Marauder CBI Theater, World War II, and Samuel Hoggets, in memory of Corporal James P. Hoggets, U.S. Marines. Teresa Rizzo, in honor of Russell Rizzo, U.S. Air Force. Barbara Baziar for the Penfield School of Education, in honor of the brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice fighting for our freedom. Nancy Sweet and Sally Schooley, in memory of Sergeant Robert Funk, U.S. Army. Daniel and Lee Moore, in memory of Private Lawrence Levy Moore, U.S. Army, World War I. Joyce and Andy Strawhan, in memory of Griff Humphrey, U.S. Navy. Catherine Zemas, in memory of Hugo Lito, U.S. Army, killed in action in World War II. And the last one here is Monroe County Sheriff's Office, in honor of those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. Thank you all for your participation.
I would next like to recognize Councilwoman Paula Metzler.
Good morning. Town of Penfield proudly maintains a special tradition for our Memorial Day ceremony by including an essay contest for any middle schooler in grades 6, 7, or 8. VFW Post 820 began this contest many years ago. Upon the Post dissolution in 2014, they made a generous donation to the town of Penfield so that we may continue this tradition. This year's essay topic was The America I Believe In, and there were 13 submissions this year. With the gracious assistance in judging the essays by the American Legion Post 1229 and the Penfield Rotary, we have our top 3 essay winners with us today. I also want to add that the judging committee noted that these 3 essays were some of the best that they have ever seen. I would like to read each person's name one by one and have them come up to share their essay with us. First, the 3rd place winner is Elizabeth Turley. She's a homeschool student, and she'll read her essay for us now.
As a young woman in the United States, I know I am incredibly privileged to call America my home. I have opportunities that many people around the world do not have. In the troubled world we live in, it is more important than ever to preserve our great nation, not only for our future, but for other nations as well. The America I believe in is strong in the face of adversity, promotes equality for citizens, and works for freedom of all mankind. As we strive to do these things, we will be able to make the world a better place. On September 11th, 2001, one of the worst tragedies in United States history occurred. In New York City, the Twin Towers were crashed into with hijacked airplanes, and many people passed on. However, the American people decided not to let tragedy overcome them, but make them stronger. People helped each other financially, emotionally, physically, and had deep sympathy for one another. Although a terrible event took place, our country bonded and united and was brave in the face of great devastation. In the America I believe in, we are all treated as equals and have the same opportunities. In other countries across the world, there are cases of discrimination of race, religion, and gender. In some nations, women do not have the chance to get an education or work for income. This creates problems for many families, as the mother may need to be the family breadwinner, but isn't able to work to feed her children or get the medical care. In the United States, we try to provide opportunities for all people, regardless of gender, religion, or economic race or economic status. In the 1770s, Americans found that life under the British control was not fair. Colonists could not make their own rules or laws and did not have much freedom. They wanted to govern themselves, so they started a revolution. They bled and perished and gave up their lives, but they were victorious. Not only did they win the revolution and form the first democratic republic, they inspired others to do the same. The American colonists unknowingly helped millions of people. By winning the Revolutionary War, they gave others hope and demonstrated that people can work for their own freedom. The America I believe in is brave and overcomes challenges, is equal and fair to all people, and inspires others to negotiate their freedom. It is important to believe in this America so that we can be a strong nation and help other nations as well. Today we honor those who believed in this America and fought for and died for our future. We have a great legacy to live up to. Let us continue to be the America we believe in.
Don't go anywhere yet. We don't only give bronze medals out in the Olympics. On behalf of the American Legion in the town of Penfield, here's a certificate of participation. Thank you so much for participating and writing a wonderful essay. And here is your bronze medal. Thank you. Something else too. You'll enjoy that as well. Okay, on to second place. Second place winner this year is Beatrice Reichman. She's a 6th grader at Bay Trail, and she'll come up and read her essay.
When I was younger, my family and I visited my great-grandfather. On that trip, I learned that he served in the Navy during World War II. This didn't mean much to me at the time. I was too focused on enjoying the captivating stories he told me. Because I was so young, I didn't understand the courage he must have had. He left his beloved family behind to protect Americans he would never meet. I still can't imagine how kind and dedicated he must have been to have risked his life in order to save others. My great-grandfather is the America I believe in. Susan B. Anthony is the America I believe in. I once had the opportunity to tour her house with my family. This inspired me to learn more about women's rights. She was determined to ensure that women had the right to vote and to own their own property. She worked tirelessly campaigning against slavery. She even persuaded a prestigious university to admit women. Susan B. Anthony taught me to be appreciative of the rights I have. Frederick Douglass is the America I believe in. He was a passionate abolitionist, an inspirational orator, and a former slave. He supported Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton in their efforts to help women achieve equal rights. I recently read a copy of a newspaper he published called The North Star. I was moved by his influential articles about the abolitionist movement, the women's rights movement, and by his experiences in the Underground Railroad. Frederick Douglass taught me to stand up for what I believe in. Anne Frank is the America I believe in. She hid from the Nazis with 7 other people in a congested annex for almost 2 years. In her diary, she wrote, "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world." Sadly, she was deported to a horrible concentration camp and died shortly afterward. Through all of this devastation, she still had optimism, hope, and a desire to live. Anne Frank taught me to be persistent even when things get tough. Jesse Owens is the America I believe in. He was a record-breaking athlete who overcame monumental challenges. The son of poor sharecroppers, he had weak bones as a child. He had to train extra hard to become an Olympian. He crushed the expectations of the world and struggled with racism. Too often, he found himself unable to eat at restaurants or ride in cars with his white teammates. Still, he defied the odds and became a role model for all people. He taught me that being a hard worker will help me reach my dreams. We are all the America I believe in. We are dedicated workers who provide for our families. We are caring parents who inspire and teach our children. We are brave veterans who protect the America we love. We are America, the America I believe in.
Go. Thank you, Beatrice. Very well done. Thank you. Okay. Last but not least, our first place winner this year, Sam Keilman, a sixth grader at Bay Trail.
My true America. The America I believe in stands for freedom. A freedom where everyone has a voice and no voice louder than another. Our founding fathers built our country with the belief that freedom is choices of beliefs, speech, lifestyle, and work. I believe in the privilege of freedom. For this to be a true America, I believe in expressing our freedoms respectfully. The America I believe in stands for justice. A justice system in which all people are treated fairly with due process. Our country has laws that need to be upheld so citizens, like me, feel safe. I believe in a country where those people accused of committing a crime are granted a fair trial. I believe that those who are found guilty should be given a punishment that fits the crime. The America I believe in stands for liberty. A liberty in which a person has a power or right to act, speak, and think without the resistance of the government telling that person he or she can't. We have the power to vote as American citizens. I believe that people can rule themselves while still following our country's laws. The America I believe in stands for development to our country. As American citizens, we should show our loyalty to our country and all that it stands for. Our armed forces devote their lives to our country. They display loyalty to the United States of America and the people of America by sacrificing their lives for the freedom of their country and its people. I believe we as Americans can show our devotion to our country in many different ways. The America I believe in stands for honor, an honor for those who currently serve and have served our country, not just on Memorial Day, but every day. I will continue to stand proud, stand tall, and pledge my allegiance to the America I believe in, my true America.
Well done. Congratulations. First place. Go. And I'll just add that although this is certainly a ceremony of remembrance, every year when we hear 3 young people come forward and read their essays about what they've learned and what it means to be an American, certainly makes us look forward with an America we can all believe in going forward. Supervisor LaFountain?
One more round of applause for Sam, Beatrice, and Elizabeth. Thank you. At this time, our troops from 312, Boy Scout Troop 312, will be raising the flag. So today, we're going to be facing south, right through the rotunda and our main flagpole right out in front of the town hall. And at this point, we'll turn it over to our friends from Boy Scout Troop 312. seated. I would like to close to thank everyone that came out today. A special thanks to Boy Scout Troop 312, who does so much to help and support this event. Thank you to all of our veterans for everything that you have done for us so that we can enjoy a day like today. And special thanks to our essay winners for your thought and your perspective about this great country we live in called America. Thank you. So many men and women need to be honored today for their sacrifices that they gave to this country so that we can enjoy our freedom. As you leave here today to enjoy your family and your friends, picnics, yards, keep in mind these brave men and women in your hearts and remember the purpose and the true purpose of Memorial Day. Let us not take for granted the freedoms they brought for us at such a high price. Let their sacrifices not be in vain. And we ask that because we didn't have the opportunity to be at our wonderful setting over at the Amphitheater and our memorial, that consider when you leave here today to leave via the back entrance and just pause for a moment and again to remember. Thank you very much. Please enjoy the rest of your day and let us never forget. Thank you.